Hello everyone and welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today's Tuesday, so we'll be taking a look at the waiver wire targets for week 5. So I'm going to say this ahead of time too, so all these percentages were from last night. Apparently there's a little bit more ESPN leagues that are running waiver wires on Tuesday morning now, because it seems like a couple of the percentages went up for different players. So if it's a little bit different in your league, that definitely makes a lot of sense. But we'll get started with it. There's quite a few guys out there on waivers to take a look at this week. So we're going to start off at the quarterback position first. We got Daniel Jones. He's looked pretty good so far this year. Last week he was 28 out of 40, 402 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 27 yards rushing. He had 30.78 points. He's rostered in 33% of ESPN leagues, 31% of Yahoo leagues. Pretty good chance that he's out there. Goes against Dallas, which their defense has been better, but they still have given up some fantasy points as well. So pretty good matchup for him. He's playing pretty well this year. He's been fantasy relevant, so there's a good chance that he might actually end up helping out your team. So probably a guy that you could stream this week. You could keep on your roster for a while. So probably a guy that you'd be up to 3% of your fab budget on. Then next up, we got to talk about Trey Lance, and this is probably going to be one of the most popular quarterback ads this week. 9 out of 18, 212 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 41 yards rushing. Very solid day for him. 24.38 points in week 4, which was playing half the game, honestly. I know that was against Seattle, so it's probably not going to happen every week. He got gifted a touchdown for Deebo Samuel because nobody remembered to cover him, but he still has a ton of potential. He's still got that rushing upside, and a guy that you should be adding to your rosters. You know, if you really need a quarterback, you can go up to 15% on him. If you don't, or if you kind of got a middling quarterback, you can go up to 10% of your fab budget on him. Goes against Arizona week 5, who's had an improved defense. We'll see how he does this week, but definitely an option going forward, especially, we don't really know how long Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be out for, but at this point, it's assumed to be at least a couple weeks. Then we moved to Sam Darnold, kind of one of the biggest surprises of this season so far. And last week he was 26 out of 39, 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 35 yards rushing, and 2 rushing touchdowns. He's added this rushing floor, which is kind of a surprise for a lot of people, honestly. 35.54 points in week 4. He was a top 5 quarterback. He is rostered in about 18% of ESPN leagues, 38% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against the Eagles in week 5, which is not a bad matchup by any means. And he has a pretty easy rest of the season schedule, so he's a guy you probably could spend up to 8% of your fab budget if you really need a quarterback. If you don't, maybe up to 5% of your fab budget. Then last but not least, one of my favorite quarterbacks from this year's draft class is Zach Wilson. He was 21 out of 34, 297 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, which was the wide receiver's fault pretty much, and -2 rushing yards in week 4, and that added up to be 21.68 points, rostered in 7% of ESPN leagues, 9% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against the Falcons this week. I'm not saying pick up Zach Wilson long term. This is just a streamable option play, so you're spending 1 to 2% of your fab budget on him. Obviously, we know the Falcons defense has not been good this year or the last couple of years, so purely just a streaming option if you need a quarterback for this week. Especially because after this week he goes on bye, then he comes back against the Patriots, and it's just not the prettiest next couple weeks for him in general. Then we move over to the running back position. We got Latavius Murray, and Tyson Williams was the surprise inactive healthy scratch in the past game. And Murray ended up playing 62% of the snaps, 18 carries for 59 yards. So a good majority of the workload, not the most effective in the world, but he did have a touchdown as well, 11.9 points in week 4. Rostered in about 34% of ESPN leagues, 48% of Yahoo leagues. So there's a chance that he's out there, goes against the Colts in week 5. Kind of middle of the pack matchup there, but definitely a guy that you probably want to add at this point in time if he's going to be that main running back for the Baltimore Ravens offense. So probably a guy I'm looking at spending, upwards of 10 to 12% of my fab budget on, especially if he's able to keep this job. He's going to be a factor for your fantasy team. Then we'll move over to probably the most popular name at running back this week is Damien Williams. So David Montgomery got injured, probably done for the year. I've heard torn ACL, but I've also heard supposedly he avoided that too. Supposedly we're going to get more news tomorrow about that. But either way, it looks like he's going to be out for quite a while. So Damien Williams played 33% of the snaps last week, 8 carries, 55 yards, a touchdown, 2 targets, 2 receptions, and 15 yards. He ended up with 15 points exactly. He is rostered in about 10% of leagues on both ESPN and Yahoo. Goes against the Raiders this week, which is a good matchup. I will say this now, though. Damien Williams also got injured in that game. He hurt his thigh. Supposedly it's just like a thigh contusion, so a bruise. As long as the pooling of the blood and the swelling of that doesn't act up and bother him during this week, he should be good to go for week 5. But if he's not, if that kind of happens and he's not, then we need to start looking at Khalil Herbert. So I'd say with Damien Williams, you could spend up to 15% of your fab budget on him. If you need a running back, maybe just a little bit more. If you want to take that dart throw on Khalil Herbert, you probably could spend 1 to 2% of your fab budget on him. A lot of leagues, you're probably going to get him for free because most people don't even know who he is. But, he's an interesting rookie running back. If he ends up getting the job this week, he could actually be somebody that you roll out. I believe they still have Latavius Murray on their practice squad, so if Williams would miss, I would assume they would promote him as well. Then it would probably be kind of a little bit of a split backfield this week. But it's also important to keep in mind that Tariq Cohen is on the PUP list. He's probably going to be back week 7, I would guess, coming back off that ACL injury. We haven't really heard too much news about it, but if that is the case, he's somebody to add too. If he's out there in your leagues, maybe if you got an IR spot, you can pick him up, stash him on IR for a couple weeks, and see what he looks like when he gets back. Then next up, we got Kenneth Gainwell for the Philadelphia Eagles. Played 39% of the snaps this past week. 3 carries, 31 yards, and a touchdown. 8 targets, 6 receptions, and 58 yards. Ended up with 20.9 points in week 4. Kind of an outlier there. You're not going to see this most weeks. ESPN, he's rostered on about 25% of leagues. Yahoo is 29%. Goes against Carolina week 5. And I'll say this. He's a really game script dependent running back at this point in time. Him and Miles Sanders are both going to be that way. So if it's a game that they're expected to be trailing most of the game, Kenneth Gainwell is probably going to get more of a snap share and going to be more involved in terms of targets and receptions. If you're going into the week, if you need a bye week filler, you need somebody to go in there, Kenneth Gainwell could be a good spot for that. But at the same time, there's going to be weeks where he disappoints you as well. I kind of look at him like similar to how we looked at James White in recent seasons. Then we got to talk about Malcolm Brown a little bit here. And Myles Gaskin looked great last year. For whatever reason, he's not, like, his snaps are just going down this year. It's like, I don't understand it, but it is what it is at this point. So Malcolm Brown played 67% of snaps this past week. 8 carries for 23 yards, 1 target, 1 reception for 4 yards. Ended up with 3.7 points. Not very good by any means, but if he's going to be playing this lion's share of the backfield, he's somebody to at least add and stash on the end of your bench, see if he does anything more. Rostered in about 12% of ESPN leagues, 6% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against Tampa Bay in week 5, which essentially means there's no way you're starting Malcolm Brown in week 5 because Tampa Bay is the best run defense in the league and Malcolm Brown's Malcolm Brown. But if he gets this role long term, he could have some value. Then next up, we got Alex Collins. He played 39% of snaps this past week, 10 carries, 44 yards, and a touchdown. 2 targets, 2 receptions, and 34 yards receiving. 15.8 points in week 4. He's rostered in 1% of ESPN leagues, 2% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against the Rams this week. Not the best matchup in the world, but this is a guy that you probably want to stash on the end of your bench at this point in time. Kind of jumped up. Not sure exactly what happened to Chris Carson in this game, but I would not go out of my way to get Alex Collins. But he's still somebody worth having on the end of your bench because we've seen Chris Carson get hurt before. If this ends up being more of a split backfield, then Alex Collins could have some value. So probably a guy that you're spending 1 to 2% of your fab budget on. Going back to Malcolm Brown real quick, probably 3 to 4% of your fab budget. Just depends if you need a running back or not. Then next up, we got Samaje Perince. He played 28% of snaps in week 4, 3 carries, 7 yards, 1 target, 1 reception for 15 yards, 3.2 points. Doesn't sound very exciting. Rostered in 2% of ESPN leagues, 3% of Yahoo leagues. But here's the thing. Joe Mixon has a sprained ankle. He's supposedly week to week, probably going to miss this week. So if you need a running back, you're in a pinch, Samaje Perince can pay off this week. Probably not going to happen long term. Joe Mixon, he's had some injuries in the past. Some of them have lasted longer than we thought they were going to last. But this is it's just a sprained ankle. He's probably missing a week or 2, if that. So they go against Green Bay Packers in week 5, so that's a good matchup as well. Him and Chris Evans probably splitting this backfield with Samaje Perince getting the majority of the workload. Chris Evans could see some pass catching work as well. So Samaje Perince, if you need a running back this week, somebody I'd spend up to 5% of my fab budget on. If you don't need one, probably closer to 2%. And then if you really want to take a look at Chris Evans in a PPR league, a deep PPR league, you can definitely do that as well. Then next up, we got Brandon Bolden, or I guess you can call him the new James White if you really want to. But he played 32% 2% of the snaps this past week. 1 carry, he didn't gain any yards on that, but that was that tough Tampa Bay defense. 6 targets, 6 receptions for 51 yards. 11.1 fantasy points in week 4. He's rostered in about 2% of leagues. Goes against the Texans this week, which, well, on paper, the Texans is a great matchup, but the fact that it's Brandon Bolden and he's kind of in this receiving role now, you probably don't want to play him against the Texans. You're probably going to want to play him in games where the Patriots are going to be in a negative game script and throwing the ball. So overall, I would say that Brandon Bolden's probably worth like 1 to 2% of your fab budget. If he gets his pass catching role, if he's playing third downs, if he's out there, at the very worst, he's going to be an okay bye week filler. And then at the best, in those negative game script weeks, you can definitely fill him in your lineup. Then we'll move over to the wide receiver position, and we got Darnell Mooney coming up first. Played 71% of snaps in week 4, 7 targets, 5 receptions, 25 yards. Also had 1 carry for 10 yards. 18.5 points in week 4. He's rostered in 41% of ESPN leagues, 38% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against the Las Vegas Raiders in week 5, which is a juicy matchup, especially considering if you watched the Monday Night Football game last night, all their corners were just like falling off every 2 seconds. So by the end of the game, they had like Amik Robertson and Nate Hobbs, and I think Casey Hayward was still playing at that point, but wasn't pretty by the end of the day, honestly. And with that being said, Justin Fields has shown that his primary favorite target in this offense is Darnell Mooney. So I believe they said he threw him like 42% of the time. Don't quote me on that. I remember seeing or hearing that somewhere. I'm not sure exactly who or where it was from, but it was out there. So Darnell Mooney, probably a guy I'd spend, 5 to 8% of my fab budget. I feel pretty comfortable with him. Probably a decent wide receiver going forward if Justin Fields is the starting quarterback. However, Matt Nagy has said Andy Dalton's going to be the quarterback when he's back and healthy. So we'll just have to see what happens in that case, though. Then next up, we have to talk about A.J. Green. And this is a guy I didn't think we were going to have to talk much about this year. Played 86% of snaps, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 67 yards, and 1 touchdown. He's actually seen 6 targets in all 4 games this season. 17.7 points in week 4. He's had double-digit points the last 3 weeks. So at the very least, A.J. Green's going to be a decent bye week filler if he's getting the volume, if he's getting these touchdowns that he's been getting. So at the very least, he's going to be a fantasy asset in a bye week filler. But A.J. Green, for as old as he is kind of as much as we've really written him off. He doesn't look half bad this year. He is rostered in about 27% of ESPN leagues, 24% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against San Francisco in week 5, which is a very, very good matchup because their corner's not looking the best. They even ran out Dre Kirkpatrick starting this week, which is pretty scary since he wasn't very good last year for the Cardinals team. So A.J. Green, definitely somebody to take a look at. Probably 3-4% of your fab budget. If you need a wide receiver, maybe just a little bit more, but definitely a solid play this week and going forward. Then next up, we got Jamison Crowder. He returned to the lineup, played 62% of snaps. He had 9 targets in this game. So we've seen Zach Wilson really target the slot, whether it was Braxton Berrios or now Jamison Crowder. 7 receptions, 61 yards, 1 touchdown. He ended up with 19.1 points in week 4. Rostered in 15% of ESPN leagues, 20% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against Atlanta in week 5, which is the juicy matchup. And we've seen Jamison Crowder have very, very valuable fantasy weeks in the past. If he maintains his slot role, he's going to be very valuable in fantasy and to this New York Jets team. And with that being said, Elijah Moore was out last week. We'll see what he does when he comes back or if he even plays this week with his concussion. But Jamison Crowder could push him off to the side just a little bit. We're not quite sure exactly what's going to happen, but could be very good for Jamison Crowder. So probably a guy like A.J. Green, probably spending like 3 to 4% of my fab budget on. Decent bye week filler. Decent guy you can throw in a pinch and help your team, especially in PPR leagues. Then we got to talk about the ghost of Randall Cobb. Played 46% of snaps in week 4. 6 targets, 5 receptions, 69 yards, 2 touchdowns. 23.9 points in week 4, so he was a top 12 wide receiver this week, mainly based on the back of those touchdowns. Rostered in about 14% of ESPN leagues, 7% of Yahoo leagues. Goes against Cincinnati this week, which is a pretty good matchup as well. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is on IR, so this is definitely going to help Randall Cobb have more playing time. His playing time has kind of increased pretty much every week. And he's got that rapport with Aaron Rodgers already. We already know that. And the 46% of snaps, that might scare some people off too. But The thing is, the Packers were winning most of this game, and he didn't really need to be out on the field. They didn't play like a whole lot of 3 wide receiver sets either. If they're in a competitive game, if he's out there more, he's definitely going to be in play. But some of these other games where they're expected to win pretty handedly or somewhat handedly, he's probably not going to be a guy that you want to roll out there unless there's just like a great matchup. But I will say this, I called Randall Cobb's big game last week. I said this is probably going to be a Randall Cobb week, just talking with different people in general. But he's definitely a good play last week and good play in DFS if you had him out there. But probably a guy I'm only looking to spend 1 to 2% of my fab budget on. Kind of like Jamison Crowder, but a guy I'm a little less excited about. Then I'm going to move over to Josh Reynolds. So I'll put this out here. If A.J. Brown and Julio Jones miss once again, he's going to be a good play. If they don't, he's probably going to be useless. So take from that what you will. And at the same time, don't overspend for Josh Reynolds. Played 78% of snaps this past week. Supposedly left the game with an injury and then came back. And he had 9 targets, 6 receptions, 59 yards. He had 11.9 points in week 4. He's pretty much available everywhere, I'm not going to lie. Goes against Jacksonville in week 5, so there is a chance that the Titans go, hey, well, we don't really need to play A.J. Brown or Julio Jones in this game, and they kind of let Josh Reynolds ride. If that's the case, it's going to be very good for him against the Jacksonville defense that's not the best in the world. But at the same time, that you probably could have said the same thing about that Jets game, and they ended up losing that game as well. So maybe they roll Julio out if he's healthy, or A.J. Brown if he's healthy. We'll just have to see at this point in time. But Josh Reynolds probably like a 1% of your fab budget guy. Definitely a good dart throw if both those guys would miss, though. Then we move over to the tight end position. We're going to start with Dalton Schultz. And this is a guy like I kind of alluded to yesterday. Probably should have made my video last week. I was thinking about him, just didn't end up putting him in. I can't remember the exact reason off the top of my head, though. But he played 79% of snaps, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 58 yards, 1 touchdown, 17.8 points in week 4. Rostered in about 22% of ESPN leagues, 34% of Yahoo leagues. Pretty good chance that he's still out there. Goes against the Giants in week 5, which is a great matchup for him overall. And Dalton Schultz, it looks like he's pretty much the guy. And I kind of know everybody wanted Blake Jarwin to be the guy last year. Didn't quite end up happening due to injury. Still hasn't happened this year. So Dalton Schultz, man, if you have a need at tight end, he's definitely somebody you can plug and play most weeks. So with that being said, he's probably a guy to spend up to 5% of my fab budget on. Maybe a little bit more if I really need a tight end. If I don't need a tight end, probably closer to 3%. Then next up, we got Dawson Knox, kind of everybody's favorite little darling in the community. Play 81% of snaps, 8 targets, 5 receptions, 37 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So 2 touchdowns definitely helped him out quite a bit. 27.7 points in week 4. Rostered in about 20% of ESPN leagues, 47% of Yahoo leagues. So it looks like Yahoo is a little ahead on this trend in general. Goes against Kansas City in week 5. Not a bad matchup by any means, honestly. Going to be a high-scoring game, so he should be involved as well. It is important to note Gabriel Davis has not played like a ton this year. He was kind of their red zone threat, honestly, last year, and it seems him and Dawson Knox have kind of switched roles, and if that trend continues, it's going to be very good for Dawson Knox. If it doesn't continue, then Dawson Knox might kind of fall off. So Dawson Knox is somebody I'm not like trying to overspend on. Probably like I talked about with Dalton Schultz, 5% of your fab budget, maybe a little bit more if you really need a tight end. If you don't, probably closer to 3%. Then last but not least, we got to talk about the streaming defenses for this week that are under 50% rostered on both sites. So first off, we got the Arizona Cardinals, 37% rostered on ESPN, 33% on Yahoo. So they're going against rookie quarterback Trey Lance, who I did mention in this video, and you're going to be like, Craig, didn't you just mention Trey Lance to pick up this week? And I'm like, yeah. But he's still a rookie quarterback. He's still going to make some mistakes in his debut. Both things could happen. He could pay off, and the Cardinals could pay off, or you just have Trey Lance for a different week as well. Cardinals' defense has looked pretty improved this year. Been putting up decent fantasy points, and going against a rookie quarterback going to be definitely pretty interesting. Probably, when it comes to streaming defenses, I'm not looking to spend any more than 3% of my fab budget on, so the Cardinals probably closer to 2%. Then we have the Chicago Bears, and they're going against the Raiders. The Raiders' offensive line is very, very banged up at this point in time. Starting a rookie right tackle, starting a second-year left guard who really hasn't played, center that was essentially their backup last year, and then potentially down to like their 4th string right guard. So there's a lot of opportunities there to get after Derek Carr. The Bears, they've been able to create pressure at a decent rate so far this season. So definitely in play. But on ESPN, they're rostered in 20% of your leagues. Yahoo, it's 50%. I'm guessing that's just because it was the Lions. And I would assume that a lot of people are going to drop them this week. So maybe this is one you add after the waiver wire if somebody in your league ends up dropping the Chicago Bears defense. But with that being said, probably like 1% of my fab budget is what I'd be willing to spend on them. Then last but not least, we got the New York Jets. And I'm going to say this right now. There was a hard time finding a third team under 50% this week. So I went with the Jets. They play the Falcons this week. Yes, Matt Ryan did look good last week. For whatever reason, that Washington defense is not panning out too well so far. And the Jets' biggest weakness so far this year has more or less been the run game than the pass game, which is kind of the reverse of what we kind of thought it would be. They are rostered in 2% ESPN leagues, 1% of Yahoo leagues. They're pretty much available everywhere. If you can get after Matt Ryan at quarterback, if you can make him make turnovers, it's going to be a matchup that you can take advantage of. It's not one I'm going out of my way to pick up specifically, but if you really need a streaming defense and there's nothing else better out there, they could be in play this week. But with that being said, that's all I have for this waiver wire video. It's a little bit longer. There's a lot more options out there this week, and I really just wanted to cover a bunch of them to help you, the viewer, as much as possible. And with that being said, like if there's a player in your league that's available that's not on my list, if you got any questions about the waivers for this week, just leave them down in the comments below. Definitely more than happy to help you out. But with that being said, if you are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. It helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is truly one for you, the viewer, helping you with your fantasy football teams, helping you with DFS, whether it's NBA or NFL, talking all the NFL news as it does come out as we are able to do so. And then as we get closer to the 2022 NFL draft, I'll be covering some of the 2022 NFL draft prospects as well. And with that being said, if you are a new or current subscriber, be sure to hit that notification bell down below. It's going to let you know every single time I post up a new video. Tomorrow is Wednesday, so that will be the starts and sits for the Thursday night football matchup. But with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you all enjoyed, and I hope each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.